everybody, thanks for checking out the post-game video for my game against Nomads in Decapitation. So as I talked about at the beginning of that video, the game swung very hard. So it ended up being a more one-sided game than I had anticipated, particularly after my first turn, where I wasted so many orders doing very little damage, not really developing my army, anything like that. I thought I was in a very bad position because of the mistakes I made. And then at the end of the game, I actually out loud said, how did this happen? Like I was confused as to how I had won so hard after having such a disastrous first turn. I couldn't put the pieces together in the moment to explain or understand what had happened. So that was kind of my impetus for actually battle reporting this game. Usually if games are particularly one-sided in my favor, if I get stomped, I'm happy to do battle reports because I can learn a lot from those. But if I just run someone over for whatever reason, I don't generally like to battle report those because they're not the most interesting games to go over. It's like, hey, I stomped this guy. Am I going to really break this down? But this one was a little different. So not only is Dylan a good friend of mine, who I want to see improve and get better and have more fun with Infinity, even though he's having a blast with it. I also, for my own knowledge, wanted to figure out why the game went the way it did. So that's what we're going to be diving into in this video. Pretty much all from Dylan's point of view. I did go over my own mistakes a bit in the video. Had a really bad first turn, used the wrong model to go after a TR bot, ended up wasting a whole bunch of orders because of that. Could have been more aggressive in going after Mary Problems, things like that, which would have swung the game even harder. So I definitely made plenty of mistakes, but I want to focus on this more from the perspective of the person that lost the game and why that actually happened. As always, I'm going to be jumping around in pictures a little bit here, so sorry if that bothers anybody. I kind of just riff on these, so don't worry about that too much. So we're not going to go over. So yeah, let's start with my overview of my deployment here, just to mention another, not necessarily a mistake, but a tactical choice that I'm going to be revisiting in the future. So I have a pretty standing way I like to deploy in almost every mission. There are some exceptions, but very few. So I typically like to deploy in only 2/3 of the board. The reason that I do that is because you can have a presence in the center, and then you have a strong flank, and then you have a weak flank. This works out particularly well if you're deploying second, because it allows you to get into a position where you can fight like maybe half, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less of your opponent's army with your entire army. It's also very good to deploy that way if you have models that kind of synergize together. So like I have the guy that throws smoke with the MSV guys. I want both of the MSV guys to be near him so that I can use whichever one is better for the current situation. I have a doctor and an engineer, so she can kind of be around the army to pick people up or fix that if things go wrong. Just stuff like that gives you a lot of I guess not power, but like it makes it so that you don't have to use as many orders moving guys around to get things done, and everybody can kind of work together with the way that you built your list. So that's why I like to do that. And then worst case scenario, your opponent just kind of mirrors your deployment, which in some missions can hurt them. It just depends on what's going on. So in this situation, I did not deploy like that. You can see I'm pretty much spread out all over the board. The Chaxes don't really count. Usually I will spread them out because their role is almost always just anti-airborne deployment. Sometimes they'll be on sensor duty, but that's usually against Ariadna or something. But I had the Rasail and a Triad more in the center right, and then one kind of on the extreme left. So I was just kind of testing out how that worked in this mission. I didn't really like it overall, but that's really the only other thing I'm going to talk about on my side is just I didn't really like how that deployment went, so I probably won't be pursuing that as a strategy in Decapitation in the future. So let's have a look at Dylan's deployment instead. So he places the designated target, as you have to. Also doesn't have a particularly good place to hide it. The way the buildings were on the table and all that kind of stuff, and how far up you have to place the designated target, there just wasn't really any nooks or crannies for him to hide in. You just have to deal with that. So he wisely uses the Morans as defensive pieces. I think they're exceptional in that role. They're repeaters, so you can do, like hacking arrows and stuff. They have crazy qualas, which are pretty much the best like defensive, kit in the game. And then they themselves are reasonably threatening, especially if they're in suppressive fire. They average ballistic skill, not the most sexy gun, just a combi, but in suppressive you can do some fun things, and they do have mimetism, so there's a little bit of something going on there. So what we can see is that the other Moran is like back here, I think, but we have a crazy koala here, crazy koala here, crazy koala here, and then I believe the other crazy koala is like up on this side or something. So they're all pretty spread out, but they are in such a way where this is pretty much like 6 inches here, and then this is like another 6 inches here. So if something starts in the right place, it can just go and collect all of these crazy koalas, which is what I did during the game. Usually if you're going to be playing crazy koalas, you want some of them to be forward and some of them to be behind. So that way it's a lot harder for someone to just move around and collect them. So like, let's say, and obviously you can only deploy them as far up as you can actually go yourself. I'm talking about not only deployment, but also like when you get to actually move them around during your turn. So like, let's say there was one, after he moved them here, and one here, and one like back here somewhere, and then one like not even pictured on the screen, so like maybe over here, or like back even further, like down this way. That would make it so that you can most get like 2 by moving around, which is a lot better, because first of all, not everybody has just like free models, quote unquote, to throw at them. Usually you're going to be using a warband for that or something, or someone that you feel can eat the crazy koalas, which not many things can. Even tags, usually need like 7s or something like that to pass on the crazy koala damage. But it just makes it so that it's a little bit harder to approach while the crazy koalas are still doing what they're supposed to be doing. So as long as they're kept within, generally like within 8 inches of the designated target, they'll probably go off and do something. So just a small nitpick there. This is all fine. Again, not really sure, and I mentioned this during the game, what the Jaguar was for. I don't know why he is over here. He's okay at defending because he just has a template weapon, but he's hiding behind a building, so he's not involved in the game or anything like that. So if we go back, there's really no reason for the Jaguar to not be like here, where it can body block anybody coming around this way from seeing the designated target, unless I take a little bit of a wider angle, in which case the designated target can dodge. It might live, you don't know. I'm going to eat a template, and then, crazy koalas and all kinds of shit like that. So the Jaguar was kept back, but it didn't seem like it really had anything to do. Like I said, usually it's a smoke bot for an intruder or something like that. But in this game, it just wasn't playing any offensive or defensive role. So effectively a wasted model that I actually forgot about as we were playing. I never ended up killing it or anything, but it never really did anything. So just certainly a missed deployment there. The Rems are fine. They both have good firing lanes, pretty far. I don't have any problem with that. Generally not a big fan of the smart missile Rems, just because they're not particularly good in ARO with their limited burst, and they're not anything special ballistic skill. Their main setup seems to be you want to get somebody into a targeted state with hacking or with a forward observer. This list can certainly do that. It has quite a few hackers, as Nomads usually do. And then you can do the auto guided fire or whatever, which is better, but I'm just still not like that big of a fan of it. The Rem is not super cheap on its own, and then you have to invest orders getting the hacking program to work, which is they're going to mean moving a repeater up with more orders, or if the guy is already near a repeater or something like that, then you might have to get through some resets or something. And then the bot itself, like I said, is not super accurate, so dodges and stuff like that are still viable even with the -3. So it's just not it requires a little too much setup to actually be a really effective strategy in my position, and I think that's why you don't see the smart missile rems very often, is just because of that combination of being order intensive to actually execute their offensive plan, and then not being super cheap for the order that you get for them. You can certainly buy something else that just stands around and gives you an order that way. Another thing, not no, that's actually fine. I was going to say I'm not a big fan of where Pywell is, but he's actually in an okay position. It was more the fact that he never did anything during the game that I wasn't a big fan of. So this deployment is a big mistake. So we have Puppet Master here, which is not a particularly good model. I don't think it should be in this list. You're playing vanilla Nomad, so you can get a Liberto Mine Layer to do the exact same thing, but be way better at it for less points. So the only thing that the Puppet Master brings is counter espionage, which is an okay rule, but it's not something I would pay 14 points for, especially on a guy who's not that good on his own. But that being said, even if you're going to have the Puppet Master, he needs to be in a position where he can see the lieutenant to ARO for him. So being over here in prone, he can't see anything and he's useless. And if somebody walks up the ladder, which is going to be the easiest way to get to the lieutenant, then this guy can't help out. I'm also not really sure why the lieutenant was in this location. So what you could have easily done is put the mine here. That's a fantastic location for the mine because it covers the entryway. And then take the lieutenant and put it like here, or even better, like down here or something. Just the more farther away you are, the better, because you don't want your opponent to be killing your lieutenant because we're playing decapitation. And then also in that way you can have, if it's up on the building, you can put the Puppet Master up there and it can shoot as people come in. Or if it's behind, you can do the same thing with the Puppet Master. And then even if you're up on the building, the Puppet Master can just take one order and put like a mine here so that, we're covering here and then we're covering there. And there's really no way to even climb up the building without triggering the mines, because if I come from like this way or something, they're both going to go off. It's just a complete nightmare. So certainly a missed opportunity there, and a missed deployment as well. That was probably the biggest deployment issue I had, was putting the lieutenant there. Another interesting choice. So we have Mary Problems and the Morlock right here. Mary Problems is not particularly good against Toha. She's all in on hacking, and I don't let her do that. So she's not nearly as good as she normally is. But she ended up being the data tracker in this mission because my designated target is like here. So that would be fine if you're going first, but because Dylan was going second and he knows I have a gal rail like right here, there's nothing to stop me other than my own incompetence, as the game actually turned out to do, from snaking over here and then just slicing the pie, acing this Morlock, and then acing Mary Problems. Very easy to do that, especially with the models that I had available. Could have approached it in multiple ways, could have chucked a smoke and then used the McCall to stab them both, something like that. There's a bunch of ways I could have approached this. And then the data tracker is dead, which means that you've just lost out on 3 points, which is a gigantic deal. So that was actually my biggest takeaway from this game, is that if you go second, you have to keep your data tracker just as safe as your lieutenant. Because if the data tracker dies, you are almost certainly going to lose the game, unless you can kill your opponent's data tracker before they can get to your designated target as well, which may or may not pan out. So a little bit reckless with Mary Problems' deployment. If she's not the data tracker, it's fine that she's there because she's just going to do whatever. But if she is a data tracker, she actually needed to be in a position like Pywell was, where he's really far away and I would have to come all this way. There's a Morlock I'd have to deal with and some other stuff. So it's very unlikely that I'm going to get to that location. So if they had switched roles or positions or something like that, then that would have been a much better thing to do. And then just another final nitpick on the deployment is Zoe should probably be down here. And the only reason for that is because there's so many REMs in this list that having an engineer is very valuable. So this way, if I kill the TR bot, she can get to it pretty easily. And if I kill the Flash Pulse bot, she can get to it pretty easily as well. I'd probably cheat her a little bit closer to the TR box. That's always going to be the focus. But I would have just liked her to see her somewhere on like this middle thing, maybe touching the ladder or something like that, just so that she could get around a little bit faster, which would probably be useful in most games. So we'll get into the game proper here. As went over the battle report, I had a disastrous first turn where I picked the wrong model to be doing stuff. Didn't prone this guy, all kinds of fun crap like that. But this is not about me in this situation. So let's talk here. I mentioned this a little bit in the actual battle report, but not dodging with the Morlock here was not a play that I particularly liked. The Liberto is not something that's like a must remove. So all he really wanted to do was take the 50-50 on the mine and then take the like 40% or whatever to not die to the mine if it wasn't able to dodge it. And that would have pretty much just negated an order that I used on the Liberto with a free order, and then also would have had a Morlock out in the middle of the table so that it can maybe throw some smoke for somebody else or do something like that, or just stay alive. So I didn't like that interaction there on Dylan's side. And then I hated this interaction with the other Morlock. So I also mentioned this during the video. Using the chain rifle is far and away the best choice here, because I made a misposition with my doctor where the Morlock can just say, hey, I'm going to fire the chain rifle the millimeter before I get into base-to-base contact, go like this, get rid of this Symbiont because I'm not going to take the arm roll and chance it. And then I'm only Fizz 11 with the doctor, so there's a 55% chance she passes the dodge. But then if she doesn't, I need 13s to pass the chain rifle save. So that's what, a 35% chance of success. So that was definitely the play if you're going to be aggressive like that. The other play was, or not, yeah, so normally another play would be to throw smoke, but I have MSV, so that wouldn't work particularly well either. But that's still a possible play because this girl doesn't have MSV, and that's actually who managed to drop the Morlock when we got into the face-to-face roll. So let's use this picture. So I can't see him here. Let's just say that the Morlock takes a second and throws a smoke right here. Very easy to get done. So it can then move into combat. I can still use the pistol or the Spitfire like I planned on, but the Kumatail is not involved in this anymore. And the reason that matters is because if I lose the first face-to-face roll, then he can just freely stab the Galrail to death. I have no support, and the Galrail is not going to be able to shoot once we're in CC. So I'm going to be using the pistol or something like that, and it's unlikely that I beat the Morlock into in a close combat face-to-face roll that way. And then even better, with the smoke up, if he does manage to kill the Galrail, he can just coup de grace it or whatever, which means that the doctor can't do anything about it, and then just position the Morlock in the smoke so that if I do anything with the doctor or the McCall, it can chain rifle both of them, and is just generally an annoying model. So the way that the interaction went, where he just moved into combat with me, didn't do any smoke, didn't do any chain rifling or anything like that, was probably the worst way to play that interaction, and ended up netting Dylan nothing except for a Symbiont and cost him a model. So I really wasn't the biggest fan of that either. Talked about this in the video a little bit as well. Put both these Morans into suppressive fire. Definitely should have included Merry Problems in that, or just any of the other models really. Like I think the Puppet Master is in the same combat group, so there's really no reason not to be putting these models into suppressive fire, especially the ones that are on dedicated defensive duty like the Puppet Master. So just I don't know if that was just a miscalculation or just forgot in the moment or something like that, but suppressive fire very useful in decapitation, so was disappointing to not see that used to its fullest. Okay, so this is a really big turning point in the game. So the Hellcat comes in. This costs quite a few orders on Dylan's part, so he uses an order on I believe Zoe, because he doesn't want to use the Lieutenant order and reveal the Lieutenant out of camo to put up assisted landing or whatever it's called. I play Toho, I don't know hacking programs. So he uses an order for that, a regular order, instead of being able to use the Lieutenant order. And then brings the model in, so that's its order. And then uses a third order to come over here and get into a face-to-face with my Rasail. So that we've used 3 orders on this, which is already a good bit of an investment. And then we just get into a disastrous fight. So as I talked about during the main video, best case scenario, this Hellcat is +6 for range because it has a boarding shotgun, -3 for cover for nano screen, -3 for suppressive fire. So it would be on 12s. My Rasail is of course going to be shooting back because that's what it's designed to do in this list, on 9s because I'm 0 band, -3 for cover. So it's 3 dice of mine on 9s against 2 dice on 12s. Very dicey there. Not ordinarily a fight that I would be incredibly excited to take. Could go either way. And that's just if it's just these two. I also have this Kael'thar over here, or someone pretending to be a Kael'thar while they're being painted, who either gets to shotgun, also at 0 range, so it would be shotgunning on 8s because of cover, or I can flash pulse on 14s because plus for range, minus for cover, which is what I ended up doing. Doesn't matter if the Hellcat dies or not. If it's blinded, it's failed in its roll. And then all it can do is really like, maybe run down here or something. The Rasail is just going to walk over here and kill it very easily. So if it's blind, it's effectively dead. And that's still assuming the +6 for the shotgun, which didn't come into play. So when we measured it, we were like 8.5, 8.25, something like that, inches away from each other, which is hard to eyeball. Like, I'm not going to talk a lot of shit about that. It's very hard to figure out if you're exactly within 8 inches or not sometimes. And it's not like you can just run out and give up the cover or anything like that. So a little bit, it's bad either way. It's bad no matter what. Before we even figured out that he was on 0 band, which made it completely disastrous, like basically just threw the model away, it wasn't a good fight to begin with. You need some way to equalize the odds here. So maybe the Jaguar can come down and throw a smoke to prevent the Kael'thar from being able to see. So now it's just a face-to-face with us here, which, like I said, is still dicey, but it's a little bit better. Or you just want to have like something come and try to soften up the Rasail a little bit. So again, the Jaguar could be used for that. Just a chain rifle and get a wound on there. Maybe try to bait me into dodging or something instead, like that. So it felt like this Hellcat was kind of the model that should be finishing the Rasail, when instead it was just trying to kill it from full. So even if we go with that, is it really going to be able to do that? I mean, I have 3 wounds and I have a Symbiont. It's going to take at least 4 orders to kill me. Usually, obviously you could take multiple wounds in one go, but that doesn't generally happen when you start running the math on it and stuff like that. So it's like, it's going to be taking all these orders and then it's a dicey fight. So even if you were really committed to this, you would probably need like a full 10 orders to get it done. And that's without even considering the fact that if I ever win a face-to-face roll, the Hellcat almost certainly dies because it needs 11s to pass BTS, because I believe they're BTS 0, but it's in cover. And then it's 2 rolls per because it's viral, and they just murder you straight out. So not only is this at best a very dicey fight, but there's no margin for error on the Nomad side, whereas I have tons of margin for error. So this was effectively using 3 orders to just give me a model as well. So you can see that heavily tilted the game. You need to be using your orders to maximum effect, especially on first turn, because that's when you have generally your most stuff alive, you're at your most powerful, all that. So throwing away, like a third of your orders in a combat group, or more, if it's I don't remember what combat group the Hellcat is in, I'm not looking at the army list right now, and a model for future turns is just completely a huge nightmare. This is when I get to kill Dylan's designated target. As I talked about, there wasn't anything really body blocking, around here or something like that for the Corral. So I just managed to, I think I came over here and just shot with cover in case tried to go for the stun pistol ARO or something like that. So could have definitely, put like a model here and then probably even like a model here so that there's no way I can go wide and see the thing, or if there is, I'm gonna have to dedicate some extra orders to it because I'm gonna have to stop like right here and then 6 move around them to be able to see it. in which case you're probably getting my Corel Preceptor in exchange because it's taking, 2 arrows to the face, just normal rolls. So that would have either kept the designated target safer, or more than likely at least picked up the Corel Preceptor as a model in exchange. So that would have been okay. It's not the best solution to designated target, but again, on the table we were playing on, there's really not that many places to hide them. So instead, I think you're kind of focused on getting trades for the designated target, and then focusing on more on the lieutenant and the army point kind of thing. But no trade was to be had. And then what ended up actually happening, if we I'm gonna jump back to that in a little bit, but the Moran then takes a bunch of orders and eventually has to kill the Corel Preceptor, which I think takes like 3 or 4 orders out of it or something like that. So that happened on turn 2, bottom of turn 2. So now Dylan is using even more orders to kill that thing. One, it doesn't matter anymore. I've already killed the designated target, so there's no real incentive to go at that model. It's pretty resilient. It's 2 wounds, and I still have my Symbiont mate left, but it's not a huge offensive threat. It just has an SMG ballistic skill 11, so it's not like I'm gonna be running around getting like a murder train with that thing. So even choosing to engage it after I'd already done what I was supposed to do with it feels like a mistake. But I mean, if he had taken it as a trade on my turn 2, then these orders would have been freed up and could have done whatever he wanted with them. So we're seeing a lot of wasted orders in this game from Nomads, which is a really easy way to lose a game of Infinity. So going back here, when I'm able to kill the lieutenant, that's where we can see that the Puppet Master's placement was just completely disastrous. He is just standing here listening to the sounds of my McCall knifing the lieutenant, over and over again. If he's like in the corner or something like that, then I have to like get up here with the Gaurel, get into a face-to-face with it. Might take a couple orders. Then I have to discover the lieutenant. That could take a couple orders as well. Dice. It's not like I'm in a 5-man fire team or anything where I have like really, really good whip. And then I have to kill it. So it's just the fact of didn't do anything to slow me down with the Puppet Master, or had I thrown caution to the wind, just go for ganking the lieutenant, could have taken some free shots or something like that and picked up some models, picked up some orders from my pool that way. But instead, the Puppet Master is just useless and then dies for his trouble. So complete waste of 14 points here, pretty much. Didn't really do anything other than slow me down a little bit with the mine. And honestly, the mine slowed me down more because of me forgetting that it was a mine instead of actual like what it would have naturally done. And then then the last thing here is we bring in the other drop troop, the other Hellcat, which looked like it was going to fight the Corel originally, but then the Moran got tasked for that. So then we have to spend more orders on the Hellcat, moving it back over here, which I believe took a full order because he had to stay out of line of fire and then cross into line of fire to be able to get in shooting me. So again, we're in the face-to-face with the Rasail. This time we have a better gun, more shots. So we're burst 4 because we have a Spitfire. We're in cover and we're in good range, which is great. So my Rasail is going to be again firing back on 9s. I'm in 0 band. He has cover, so 9s with 3 dice. Whereas the Hellcat is, I believe, also on 9s because +3 range, -3 cover for nano screen, and then -3 for suppressive fire. So again, very dicey fight. I don't ever recommend going after these unless you really, really have to. It's possible Dylan felt that he did have to at this point in the game. After all, I've successfully killed his lieutenant. We've each killed designated target. So it's kind of do or die at this point. But, we're on the exact same number, and the only advantage he has is +1 burst, which is not nothing, but it's very close to a 50-50. And then you have to go back to the point that I made earlier, where I have loads of margin for error because of all these wounds that I have. At this point, I had taken a wound from a crazy koala, but I still have a Symbiont mate and 2 wounds and a doctor in the list, so you will have to shoot the unconscious body. And I still have the Corel, who is helping out on arrows and is not pie sliced or anything like that. So and the Hellcat has no margin for error again. So we can see that I get a little bit lucky and win the first face to face roll and kill the Hellcat. But again, it's just a disastrous fight. So again, we're using the Hellcat's order to bring it in. And then we use another order to move around, and then use another order to get into the fight. So a little bit of a wasted order there from some indecision. If that's the way he was going to do, just drop the guy here instead of dropping him here, save that order from moving. That's a pretty basic thing. So again, we're just wasting more orders and giving me models on the active turn. That's why when it's your active turn and one of your models dies, it feels so bad, because not only have you put orders into this model, so they're kind of wasted at that point, but that model is also now dead, so your army is weaker in your future turns, and your opponent didn't have to use any orders to make that happen. You used orders to lose future orders. It's just disastrous when stuff dies on your active turn. It's one of the reasons I love Toha so much, because that almost never happens to us because we have so many wounds. But we can see that across both Hellcats, we used 6 orders to do nothing other than get them killed. So just completely, falling apart right there. And that's pretty much the story of the game is those fights I've already highlighted. There's some other stuff, but by the time my turn 3 comes around, the army is just in so many shambles from me going up the left flank with the Spitfire Gaurel, killing Merry Problems, killing the Puppet Master, killing the Interventor or Intruder Lieutenant, whatever it was. And so picking up a lot of orders that way. And then, Dylan already being low on orders on his turn 2, using them very ineffectively on this, Moran and this Hellcat, pretty much using all of his orders there. And then in the end, me picking up the Hellcat as well, just to add insult to injury. So that's really where the game turned, is that even though my first turn was so poor, and Dylan's first turn was okay, he got some stuff done on the mission, all that kind of stuff, set up some defensive things, but didn't commit enough to the defense, had some bad interactions with the Morlocks, things like that, that either lost him orders or preserved some of my orders, sometimes both. And then on turn 2 we see even more of that. So the Hellcat dies, the other Hellcat died on his turn 1. So just feeding me models and things like that after I'm already also attritioning him really hard. And that's what made it so that by the time even my turn 2 came around, I was just like, man, there's not that really anything threatening me or anything like that. So that's really the story of the game. The other thing that I think happened is that I don't think this list is particularly optimized for direct action mission. Dylan told me this is his list for, I think, Armory and Firefight, and I think maybe Decap as well. So in direct action missions, you really need at least 1 to 2 pieces or a fire team or something that you can lean into hard to get some work done. And there's nothing like that in this list. It's a lot of defensive stuff. The Morans are more of a defensive support model. TR bot is defensive. Flash bots are defensive. The smart missile bot is kind of an offensive piece, but a very order intensive one, like I said. So we don't really have any kind of offensive models outside of some hackers, which are not across the board offensive. Obviously, if you play against an army or a list that doesn't have much hacking, much hackable targets, then they aren't going to be doing much, very, very much for you. The Hellcats are certainly capable of getting into some trouble and stirring things up, but I don't, I want something that has a little more oomph to it, especially in a direct action mission. The Spitfire one and the boarding shotgun, are fine weapons for them, but I would have liked to see like a Taskmaster or, just some other big thing, maybe like an Iguana or whatever their tag is called, the cheaper tag, to kind of act as more of like a focal point on the list, so that, when it's your active turn, you're like, all right, this guy, he's going to go get it done. And that I think would have panned out a lot better in this game as well, because it was just like, I never really felt like there was anything particularly threatening that I had to worry about as far as offensive output, and that allowed me to be a little more carefree, I guess. Just one less thing to think about and all that. And I think that certainly contributed to the game's outcome. So like I said, I would definitely switch some things. I probably would not take the missile rem. I would certainly change the puppet master to a liberto. Libertos are so good. They're so good. If you play a vanilla faction that like if you're not vanilla Pano because they don't work for them, but if you're playing like any faction that's vanilla and you can take a liberto, you really should. They're good in every mission. They're so cheap. Like, they're just fantastic. So like seeing that puppet master in there instead of a liberto, definitely tipped me off that was, I would go as far as calling that a straight up mistake. I don't know what the Jaguar's purpose in this list is. There's no MSV2 for him to go up with. And in general, I just feel like there's a little bit too much support going on. We have all these rems. We have Zoe, who's a pure support model. The Moran's kind of skewed that way. Things like that. And so it's like, it's a lot of points tied up in these support models. And I just wanted a little bit more, oomph, a little more business from the list, which I think would help it out a lot more, especially in these kinds of missions. Because if there's, like I said, a tag or something like that is just getting all the orders from the main combat group on the active turn, and then we give a couple orders maybe to the Morans and stuff like that, just to keep them in suppressive and place their crazy quals and all that kind of stuff, well, then I think that would have been a much more effective and probably easier to play with list. So that's just kind of a word of advice there. So that's the mystery of what happened in this game, why I won the way that I did, and I think that's useful, especially if you're a newer Infinity player like Dylan is. Kind of thinking about the game from a macro perspective like that. It's like, before I commit to even bringing this drop troop in and fighting this thing, what are my odds in that fight? Is this a good fight to take? Should I be dropping this guy somewhere else and doing something else with him? He could have easily, tried to go on a run with the boarding shotgun model in a different part of the table and just gone through me that way and weakened me by costing me a lot of orders. But instead, I think he was more focused on, okay, I feel behind. I have to make these plays with the against the Rasail, and it ended up costing him because they weren't good fights and things like that. So those are, I've wrote about this before, but I think that there's levels to it, as I think that's a Drake song or something, but there's certainly levels to Infinity as far as like learning curves go and stuff. So like your first one is always going to be, you got to get the rules underneath you and figure out that kind of stuff, which is a monstrous task. But then once you kind of are more familiar with the way the game plays and things like that, that's when you have to get into running odds in your head as far as, is this a good fight? Is this a bad fight? What ARO should be taking? What, this, that, and the other. And that kind of thing, which is much less obvious, as well as, getting into positioning, thinking ahead, that kind of stuff. Infinity is very much like, chess or like a classical strategy game, in that way that you do have to think at least one turn ahead, sometimes 2 turns ahead if it's the first turn of the game, as far as like planning goes and things like that. And you can see that, or at least it's obvious to me that a lot of that wasn't going on in this game with some of the stuff I brought up during the video. And I think that's certainly the place that I'm at right now, is trying to make all of that stuff perfect, or as close to as I can get it every game. And I think that's where the bulk of Infinity players are. It's very, very few guys who are way up on the top level who get that stuff right all the time and know matchups very well and all that kind of stuff. And then the very low people who are like brand new to the game and are just trying to pick up the rules and things like that. Most people exist in that fat range band there, or not range band, but that fat that tier there, where you're just trying to get all that into muscle memory or whatever you want to call it. And then I think once you have that down, that's when you become a truly great player, especially at this game. So that's my pretty detailed breakdown of this match. The match itself, the way it played out, not the most exciting, but I think going back and looking over why it happened like that is much more interesting, and you can get a lot more out of that as far as, you know, improving your own play or what have you. So that's all I have for this one. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble about these little intricate things, and I'll definitely see you next time.